Well, remember the storyboard I used to put my screws in on my workbench? I made one 11-inch centers to put screws in my panels. And all you have to do, since it's 16-inch centers, is if that's mounted in the middle of the center, you come over and mark 16 inches right like that, right? And you can come on to 32 inches, or you can come over here 16 inches and mark your center. And then you can take your storyboard and you line up the mark at the top and the bottom. And then you can mark your 11-inch centers from the floor. In fact, I need to put an arrow on this up and down because I'm going to come up 2 inches on the bottom. And then all you have to do is push that up against the board and mark every 11 inches on that line. And then you'll know where to put your screws. And they'll be all nice and uniform all the way across this whole work. When you're putting up paneling or plywood like I'm doing, the cut might be not perfectly square on the bottom. And so when you hold it up to the 2x4, you want to hit it in the middle. And see, that one's in the middle, but down there it's way off. Now you can put a screwdriver under that and a block of wood, a big screwdriver or a crowbar, and you can angle this up, especially if you're working by yourself. So if I bring that up, you see I have equal space on each side. So what I have to do is the space that's down there, when this is up here even, which I'll bring over. So if I bring it over the distance between what the mark at the bottom and the mark at the top was, and I step on my screwdriver, since I usually work by myself, I can raise the corner and get that mark. And see the mark down there is on line. And the reason I've already put a screw there and there is because while I'm holding my hand on this thing and my foot on that, I got to screw that screw in so it won't go down. I had the drill behind me. I picked it up. I screwed that one in. I screwed that one in. I can take my foot off of that. And then if you come over here, if that one's square and these 2x4s are square, that one will hit straight down. And that's how to line up a piece of plywood. And like me, I'm going to put a section in here because I have wiring behind there. I don't think there's any reason why this wiring would ever have to be torn out. But since I'm putting it in with deck screws, I can put one little panel in here and put the deck screws in it and take it out if I had to. And if you do it right, see that? 15 sixteenths, 15 sixteenths, 15 sixteenths. So all I have to do is cut one 15 and 15 sixteenths on my table saw, one of these scrap pieces, and it'll go right in there, and no seam, no cracks. So you gotta have them level to everything, and then it doesn't hurt to check the distance between the two, just to make sure that it's not going to be off so much that you'd have a large crack. Now I need a piece 11.5 inches wide, and I have a little table saw, and you certainly wouldn't try to cut a piece of 4x8 sheet of plywood on a small table saw. You would need a serious table saw with a big table around it to be able to cut plywood. And the best thing you can do is you can cut it with a circular saw. What you have to realize is that blade, when it cuts, you measure from the back of the blade, because that's where the wood's going to be. And it's 1.5 inches out here to this edge of this fence. So this is the piece I need, 11.5 inches. So all I did is I marked this board at 13. Then I put a clamp there. And you have to get a straight 2x4. And since I wanted to show you another way to do it, you could just take that straight 2x4, drill a hole in that piece of wood so that the big long wood screw would go through it, and screw it in on each end. And then if you hold the edge of that saw up against that fence, and there's no daylight under here, sometimes you have to put weight on that so that the edge of the fence wouldn't get under it in case that board was bowed, which would make the cut wrong. And then, since that's laying pretty flat, all you have to do is keep that fence up against that right there, and it will cut right on that mark. And then I'll have a piece that can go in there. That's 11.5 inch piece I just cut, and this left the 1.5 inch between the blade and the side of the fence on the saw. And see, I need to cut one for that, I need to cut one for the middle, I need to cut one for the two ends. So I need 3 more pieces. I found the best way to cut a hole for these outlets is to put the board in place if possible. Otherwise you have to measure from the floor to the bottom and draw that on your board, and then measure from here over. And the boxes are about 2 1/8 by 4. So you make this opening a little bit wider, at least 1/8 of an inch on each end and at least 1/8 of an inch on each side, because you're not trying to make a puzzle piece, you're just trying to get it to go around the box. And then I did that one over there, and then you drill a hole in the corners, preferably 2 different corners diagonally opposed, and then you can put your jigsaw in there and cut from there to there and there to there, and then cut from this hole over to there and down to here. Then you can come up here and put it in place. It can be a little bit wider because this has a cover plate on it. It's just like seams and cracks in carpentry. That's why they invented molding. It doesn't have to be exact because the molding covers all the little defects in the corners and on the seams, on the ceiling to the floors. That's the holes you cut with a spade bit, and that's a spade bit, and the spade just has to be wider than your hacksaw blade in your skill saw. And then you just cut. When you measure these, you cut the line out so the line isn't there, and that should give you a gap all the way around the whole box. And about 5 minutes later, that's what it looks like. All I gotta do is screw it into the wall. Well, today's Saturday, April the 5th. My bride had to work today. She has to work 1 day a month and 1 holiday a quarter. So I came down here to the river. It's 5:30 here on the East Coast, and I got here at 10:30. So I've worked 7 hours, and I am definitely tired. All this has been cut and plastics up. I stretch that plastic around, staple it just to keep it out of the way until we can insulate those spaces. And all this is done. There's a few screws missing at the bottom floor when I get this tired. Like I'm going to need a screw to kick that back. When I get tired, I don't like getting down on my knees putting in screws. But anyway, turn around here and get away from this trouble light. Time to go up the country.